What's up, guys? So, first things first, wanted to wish you guys all a happy new year and a belated Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate. Merry whatever. So, it's been a while since I've uploaded. A lot has happened in terms of, I got a strike on my channel. YouTube doesn't like it when I speak the truth, and unfortunately, all I do is speak truth, or at least the truth I believe in. Every person thinks they're a good guy doing the right thing, and sometimes your right thing is someone else's bad. So yeah, I had a strike for a week, so that kind of chipped away at me wanting to upload. And then on top of that, for men like me, men that don't have women, men that don't have much success or much motion in life, the holidays are a bad time, man. They're a bad time for men like me, men like us. If you identify with me, yeah, they're a bad time. It's kind of like our version of a period. You know how women have they get their menstrual cycles. For us leftover men, whatever you want to call. It's during the holidays, man. I'm kind of on edge throughout the holidays because I'm just getting mogged. But I wanted to talk about a lot of different things, but most importantly, I wanted to focus on this whole New Year thing. I feel like for men like me, the New Year doesn't really mean anything. It's just you buy a new calendar. Maybe your phone says a different date. But realistically, it's not, it's not anything groundbreaking or ground changing for us. Um, New Year, same me, new year, new me. It's all a load of BS in my opinion. It's just, you are who you are. Don't think that just because there's a new date on the calendar that all of a sudden you're going to become a slayer. All of a sudden, oh man, it's 2026, make or break. It's like we say that about every year. Every year is the make or break year. Every year is the final. Like, oh man, 2019, it's our last hope. It's like I feel like that's like a common trend amongst here. Where we feel like every year is the last year because it's like we're like, I don't know, we live in this like scarcity type of mindset where we think like time is running out, which I mean it is, but at the same time, I mean, if you're an excess male, you never had time to begin with. It was over from the jump. So, but uh, you know, this whole New Year's resolution stuff. I'm gonna lose 50 pounds. My New Year's resolution's to give up alcohol. I'm gonna have a better relationship with my parents. You don't gotta wait till the freaking calendar says a different date for you to freaking do all that. That's all stuff you could do any moment. Truth is, if you want to change, you're gonna change. You're not gonna change because of a calendar. You're gonna change because you want to change, right? And it's like, I don't know. I feel like men like us understand that already. I feel like men like us already kind of have a grip, and we're pretty much grounded in reality, and we're aware that there are certain things that you just can't change. As much as I wish I could say my New Year's resolutions to get a girlfriend for the first time, it's not. It doesn't mean it's gonna happen. You know, and just because it's New Year's doesn't mean you're gonna get superpowers. It's kind of like I feel like the New Year thing is kind of like NoFap, where yes, yeah, there is a little bit of inspiration because it is a new year, but at the same time, it's mostly like pseudo. It's mostly like what do they call that thing when you take a sugar pill and you think, you give a kid a little shot of water, and he just drinks it and he's like acting drunk. It's placebo. It's like it's placebo effect, man. Same thing with NoFap. Yeah, when you don't fap, maybe, you build up life fuel and, oh, you feel more on edge and you feel more calculated and more, but yeah, at the same time, it's just the placebo. Same thing with New Year's, man. But it's like New Year's is just, New Year's does mean something for us, for men like me, us men that don't have really an emotion or a loved one. It does mean something for us, but it means we made it. It kind of means like, all right, you survived the mogging season. Tis the season for a mogging, and you survived. Now we're in January. It's there's nothing really important happening. Yeah, we got Valentine's Day in a month and a half, but at the end of the day, Valentine's Day is just a 1 day thing, and it's just another day you got to go into the den and not go out. So we got a good amount of time ahead of us where it's not a season for a mogging. Life just kind of goes back to normal, and that's my favorite part of the year. I used to live for holidays, but the older I get, I live for normal days. I love normal days. I love business days because it's like you could go get your stuff done, and I hate special occasions. It's very annoying. But it being New Year's doesn't mean that I'm gonna all of a sudden develop superpowers. That I'm all of a sudden gonna develop, this life changing grit, this life changing like audacity. That I'm gonna go up to my crush and I'm gonna put my hand on her shoulder and be like, "Hello, baby," and that she's gonna be like spiritually overcome by the new year and be like, "Wow, his aura," and all of a sudden I'm gonna get my girlfriend and I'm gonna lay down some rod and I'm gonna impregnate her and my child. Nah, man. It's just a different year. It's just a different calendar. And I feel like I said, man, men like us already know that. If you're a man like me and you're making these New Year's resolutions, you still got a little bit of learning to do. But that's okay. Every man should continue to want to learn and want to improve and want to better himself. But thinking that a calendar is going to do that for you, it's kind of silly. At the end of the day, if you want to make a change, you make a change. If you don't want to make a change, you don't make a change. Doesn't matter whether whether you do it or not, man. Doesn't matter whether it's a new year or not. But, I feel like these days that we just passed, that we overcame, unfortunately, there's probably at least a couple guys that didn't make it to see the new year. They probably opted out. They probably logged off. If you catch my drift, because you do see a lot of brutal things, man. For Christmas, I didn't really do much. I just ate a hamburger. I had like patties and I made some hamburgers for myself, and I spent Christmas Eve, my mom was here, and then on Christmas Day, my mom left. She left to go visit my aunt. So on Christmas Day, I was alone. And I hopped on Instagram, and I used to go to school with this one guy, and we were pretty close friends. We kind of, we've drifted apart, obviously. And, I was kind of just looking at myself in the mirror, nothing, no one, no presents, no like big family. And then I saw this guy's story on Instagram, and it was this Christmas tree full of gifts, and he had like little kids running around, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters, and cousins. And one thing that the season we just passed by really does help you see is how alone you are. It helps you really see how alone you are. And I saw, my neighbors, they were like 20 deep. They were outside bumping music all night. They stopped playing music till like 6 a.m. on Christmas. And so that whole night I was just like getting mogged by a speaker. And then on New Year's, they didn't stop playing music till like 10 a.m., man. They were up all night. And it's just like, it just helps you see what you don't have. You don't have this close, tight-knit family. Or maybe you guys do, but I don't. Help me see that I don't have this close, tight-knit family, and that more than likely is going to get lonelier and lonelier. If I manage to make it into an older age, by some age, my mother will pass, and I'll no longer have my mother. My dogs will pass. I'll no longer have my dogs. And, my siblings will just do what they were doing this year, which was living their life with their people. And, it kind of helps you see. It kind of helps you realize, that you're a very lonely individual, and that you really don't have much of a future in terms of this whole like family thing. But it's like 2030, man. It's almost here. It's almost here. And it's just crazy how time is just flying by. This was the quickest year of my life. I'll say that. It was the quickest year of my life. It was the year that flew by the fastest. And I'm sure it's going to get quicker. I'm sure the older you get, they just get quicker. And, another thing New Year's kind of has helped me see is, time is just going by, man. Time is just going by. I'm aware that that's how the world works and time goes by. But, my birthday's coming up. I'm about to be 28. In a couple months, I'll be 28 years old, 2 years away from 30. And I'm basically 30 already. If we were talking about, rounding up, I'm basically 30 years old. And, the new year passing, it really helped me accept that I won't ever have a wife. I won't ever have children. I won't ever have this big giant family. And I think it being 2026 already, I think most men should already accept that. You should swallow that. You should already start learning to appreciate, even though it might be cope. You should start learning to appreciate your solitude. You should learn to appreciate that maybe by you being alone, you don't open up yourself to being hurt. Some people probably died on Christmas. Some people probably died on New Year's, and if they have a lot of people in their life and they lost somebody that day, it would hurt them and they'd be crying. But the less people you have in your life, the less hurt, right? And it being like I said, it being 2026, I think it's time that most men like me, we snap out of that desire to want a family. We snap out of that desire to have children because it's unachievable for us. It's just not going to happen. There are certain men who were born simply to just exist for themselves, not for their children, not for their wife, for their spouse. No, right? Most of us were just born to be with ourselves. And, like I said, maybe we should start learning to appreciate it because the years are just ticking by, man. And if we just sit there angry every freaking Christmas, every New Year, angry because we don't have a girlfriend, sooner or later, our brain is going to tell us to do something we don't want to do. And yeah, man, it's like 2026. What could we do in 2026? Maybe in 2026 we could learn a new thing. Maybe if you have you want to learn an instrument, learn it. If you want to travel to Thailand and pay for some box, do it. If you want to travel to freaking Estonia, do it, man. Because like I said, these years are just going by, bro. It was 2019 like 2 days ago. And now we're in 2026. And 2030 is going to be here by the time we know it. I've been doing this whole YouTube thing on some level for almost 4 years now. This isn't my first channel. And it probably, with the strike, it probably won't be my last channel. I'll probably end up having to start over like I've had to already. And, the years are just going by. And if we just continue to chase a dream, such as a family, a wife, and kids, it's something that's unachievable to us. Some men are locked out and simply they just can't get in. It's like our wife and kids are behind this glass box and there's nothing we could do to get inside the glass box. We could sit there and we could kick the box and we could punch the box and we could go get a angle grinder and try to cut our way into it, but it's just not going to work, man. So like I said, I think 2026 should be a wake-up call to a lot of us men that are unlucky when it comes down to love and romance, to just kind of start learning and accepting how to be at peace with ourselves. We should learn how to be at peace with ourselves. And, to learn to be at peace with yourself entails a lot. Give up on certain dreams, man. If you're that guy that thinks that he needs to be making $100,000 because he needs to provide for his wife and his kids, but you've never had a girlfriend at 30, give up on that. Maybe reduce yourself to part-time. Enjoy your life a little bit more. Quit chasing these dreams that are just inaccessible to us. We're about to be in 2030, man. Most of us are late millennials, Gen Z, early Gen Z. So we're already, we're getting up there in age, man. We're not ancient, but we're unk. We're like reaching unk status. If a little 15-year-old called me unk, I wouldn't even look at it too. I wouldn't even look at them sideways because I am unk. I'm about to be 28, bro. 28 is the age where like whether you were gonna have a wife or kids should already be seen. So take 2026, especially if you're new to this kind of side of the internet where you listen to men talk about their issues. You should take 2026 as a wake up call to start giving up on unrealistic dreams. If like I said, if your dream and your goal is a wife and kids and a family, you should grab that dream. You should pour a big bucket of water, grab that dream, and then drown it in the water. And then pull out the dream when it's just a carcass, and then throw it away and in some freaking landfill. Because it's like if 2026 is here, and next year's 2027, and then 2030 is about to be here, and you're still chasing this the dragon, you're cursed. You're gonna lose your whole life chasing the dragon, chasing that fairy tale of a wife and kids. That's why, like I said, whenever I see guys and they're still going on about how they want a wife and kids and they want, obviously I wish I could have that, but I'm learning to accept that that's not who I'm going to be. Is it cope? Yes. But is it also cope to sit there and think that I'm going to have a wife and kids? I think that's a bigger cope. I think that's a more detrimental and negative cope, to just continue to wish you have something you can't get. And these years, man, they're just flying by. They're just flying by. A lot of us are about to be 30. I know a lot of you guys are probably around my age range, maybe a couple years younger, a couple years older. 30 is here, 20 years away from 50. We're pretty much more on that side of 50 than we are on this side of being newborn. At least me, I'm about to be 28, 22 years away from 50. That's how we should start looking at things, man. How close are you to 50? Because 50 is the end of life. Like that's why, a man like myself, I'm not really ever going to dedicate myself to a job where I'm going to I'm going to chase this career. I'm going to get the city job. And because it's already kind of like, all right, I already know what is going to be of me. I already know that I'm not going to have a wife and kids. So a man like me doesn't need much. If I could have a little, a nice little comfy room with the kitchen and, a bathroom with the shower, just for me, enough for me, that's fine. That's ideal, because I'm not going to have a wife or kids. And I really want to leave that delusional wishing I had a wife and kids stuff back there, back in the 2010s, man, because the 2020s have been so mean to me that it's honestly foolish for me to think that I'm going to just acquire that like all of a sudden you're going to, like in your 30s, you're going to have this like Chad awakening, and your bones are going to like morph overnight, and you're going to gain 6 inches of height overnight, and your bone structure is going to completely morph itself into a Chad. And like all of a sudden, like decades of negative reinforcement are going to be lifted from your mind and replaced with decades of positive reinforcement. It's give up, man. Give up on that stuff. I think men like us, men like myself, we should start trying to find a way to maybe get what we want in terms of carnal desire through other methods, such as payment, equivalent exchange, maybe traveling. Unfortunately, yeah, it is something that some men like us might have to do. And if you think you're above traveling for box, fine by me. Stay in the U.S., pay American women, do your thing, or continue chasing your tail. I know there's a lot of guys that just continue chasing their tail when it comes down to that whole relationship thing. And if this holiday season wasn't an awakening for you, where you realized kind of like the bucket of cold water hits you and you realize that you're not going to get a wife or kids, then you're probably never going to learn, and you're probably going to reach 2030 still trying to achieve that. And by that time, you're going to be almost 40 years old. So, yeah. But yeah, man, it's like, I don't know, the whole New Year's thing, the whole New Year, new me thing. I think the only thing useful to get out of New Year's is just realizing how much less time you have now. It's one less year to live. 2025 was a year that's gone forever. We're never getting it back. And we're just getting older, slower, weaker. Opportunities are closing up. Every year you get older, you get less opportunities. You're less likely to get hired. You're less likely to be found attractive by women. My generation, late, early, very early Gen Z, a lot of things are going to start wrapping up for us, man. A lot of things are going to start wrapping up for us. A lot of things are kind of like inching away from our grasp. So, I don't know, man. This New Year stuff, it's just, I'm just kind of starting to mature a little bit in terms of get a little bit more aware of what I'll have to do to get what I want out of life. If I want to enjoy some sweet, watery guts from a bad woman, a bad looking woman, I'm probably going to have to cough up some dough, because, it's just the way it is, man. But yeah, man, I don't know if this video made too much sense, kind of just rambling or babbling, but I am the babbling loner. So I guess, once again, happy New Year's, but don't think that the New Year's going to make a new you. Don't think that the New Year is going to bring you, you're going to just all of a sudden become sexy and hot to women. It's not, man. You're just getting older. So keep that in mind.